Hi, I'm Dr. Eliza Liz Hawthorne, and this is the story of how my stepbrother's greed taught him an expensive lesson about underestimating a country vet with a PhD. Sometimes the person in muddy boots with soil samples knows, more than the one with the sleek digital presentation. Hawthorne Farms wasn't just any cattle ranch. It was home to the most prestigious breeding program in Texas, with bloodlines worth millions and genetic markers coveted worldwide. My grandfather Harold started it after returning from World War II. My father James expanded it to international recognition, and I dedicated my life to it, earning my veterinary degree and genetics PhD specifically to advance our award-winning herd's legacy. The weight of this responsibility pressed on my shoulders every morning. I woke before dawn to check our animals. Everything changed when Dad married Vivian Westfield 5 years ago. My heart ached watching how quickly he fell under her spell. She arrived with her son, Parker, who had an MBA from Wharton and grandiose plans to digitally transform our traditional operation. My stomach knotted the first time he walked through our barn, wearing Italian leather shoes, casually stepping over decades of carefully developed breeding protocols. "Liz, darling," he'd say, swiping through investment projections on his tablet. "While I analyze genetic markers from pregnant heifers, you're thinking too small. We need to scale up, maximize profits, implement AI prediction models. All this personalized genetic profiling is burning through our operational margins." His condescending smile made my skin crawl, but I kept my focus on the pregnant heifer beneath my hands. What Parker failed to understand, what made my blood boil every time he opened his mouth, was that our reputation wasn't built on margins. It was built on producing the finest cattle in the country. Through scientific excellence combined with generational knowledge, every serious rancher from Texas to Tokyo knew that a Hawthorne bloodline meant genetic excellence. Our breeding contracts commanded 7 figures and had a 3-year waiting list that spanned 4 continents. But Parker only saw numbers floating on his digital dashboard. He started pushing Dad to embrace factory farming methods complete with AI-monitored feed optimization and genetic standardization, treating our operation like a commodity producer, rather than the specialized breeding program it was. Dad, his eyes lighting up at Parker's digital presentations and corporate confidence, began to listen, breaking my heart a little more each time. "I've tried explaining why mass production would destroy everything we've built," I argued one evening, my voice trembling with frustration. As I spread our genetic success data across Dad's desk, "Our international clients pay premium prices because they know our animals represent 7 generations of careful genetic selection combined with individual attention. They're not buying bulk cattle. They're investing in genomic excellence and proven resilience traits." Parker would just roll his eyes, the blue light of his phone illuminating his smirk. "That's why you're still playing lab coat scientist with the cows, while I'm handling the actual business strategy. The market doesn't care about your sentimental attachment to these animals, Liz." What they didn't know was that 7 years ago, when I finished my doctoral program at UC Davis, my grandfather had quietly established a separate company. In my name, Hawthorne Genetics LLC. Every valuable bloodline, every international breeding contract, every prize-winning animal's genetic profile was registered under this entity in the International Livestock Genetics Database. The farm only maintained a license to use and profit from these genetics, as long as they adhered to our traditional breeding standards. I could feel the weight of my grandfather's foresight every time I touched the antique pocket watch he'd left me. "Protect the bloodlines, Lizzie," Grandpa Harold had said, his weathered hand clasping mine before he passed. "They're not just animals, they're your family's true legacy. Generations of scientific advancement and care. Don't let anyone reduce them to mere commodities." His eyes, still sharp at 86, had pierced right through me, and I'd nodded, feeling the full weight of his trust. The situation came to a head at last. Month's International Livestock Genetics Forum in Geneva. Our prized bull, Monarch, had just won Supreme Champion, adding another $15 million to his breeding value, with contracts pouring in from 3 continents. Parker's eyes gleamed with dollar signs as he furiously typed calculations on his phone, but he completely missed what made Monarch truly extraordinary: the 15 generations of careful selection that had produced his unique disease-resistant genetic markers. The morning after our return, he convinced Dad to call an emergency board meeting at the main house. My heart pounded against my ribs as I took my seat at the long oak table. that had witnessed generations of farm decisions. It's time for Hawthorne Farms to enter the digital agriculture revolution, Parker announced, standing confidently in his tailored designer suit, looking jarringly out of place, amid the century-old family portraits and worn leather furniture. I've developed a comprehensive digital transformation strategy that will triple our production capacity through algorithmic breeding optimization. He flashed through digital slides on the wall-mounted screen outlining his vision, selling off our overvalued legacy assets, our champion bulls, replacing them with volume production metrics, converting our carefully managed pastures into high-density feeding operations monitored by drones and AI sensors. James has agreed to sign over controlling interest to me, Parker continued, directing a triumphant smile in my direction that made my stomach churn. We need decisive, forward-thinking leadership, not someone who wastes resources, playing scientist with the animals, when automated systems could do the job more efficiently. I watched, my throat tight with unshed tears as Dad signed the papers, Vivian, beaming beside him as she snapped photos for her social media accounts. 20 years of my scientific research and breeding work, being handed over to someone who saw our animals as nothing but numbers on a digital dashboard. The antique pocket watch felt heavy in my pocket, my grandfather's voice echoing in my head. Don't worry, Liz, Parker said, his patronizing tone cutting like a knife. We'll still need someone with your technical background on staff as long as you learn to work more efficiently with our new automated systems. No more of this individualized genetic profiling nonsense. I stood up quietly, my hands steady despite my racing heart. I need to check on Monarch. He has a semen collection scheduled for international shipping tomorrow. The Japanese buyers are particularly interested in his F135 genetic marker. Whatever, Parker waved his hand, dismissively, already turning to the investors joining the video call. Just make sure all the export paperwork is ready for when I take over next week. We've already got buyers lined up for some of these overpriced animals who don't care about their fancy pedigrees. I drove my weathered truck out to Monarch's specialized pasture, where he grazed contentedly with his carefully selected herd companions. The setting sun painted his magnificent form in gold, highlighting the perfect confirmation that had made him a living legend in the breeding world. My hands trembled slightly as I pulled out my phone, making a call I'd hoped I'd never have to make. Dr. Martinez? It's Liz Hawthorne. Remember Protocol Omega we established after Harold passed? It's time to activate. My voice sounded strange in my ears, calmer than I felt, as I watched Monarch's powerful silhouette against the Texas sunset, possibly for the last time on this property. The next morning dawned bright and clear, the kind of perfect Texas day that normally filled me with joy. Parker arrived early in his gleaming Tesla, ready for his first official day as the new CEO of Hawthorne Farms. According to his assistant's leaked schedule, he had Asian investors coming to evaluate Monarch, planning to sell breeding shares of our champion bull for quick capital. His tires kicked up dust on our century-old ranch roads as he drove to the main office complex, already talking loudly on his Bluetooth about digitization and scaling plans. He was so busy swiping through his tablet that he didn't notice something. All the specialized pastures were completely empty, the monitoring equipment dark. I sat in my research office, methodically organizing genetic reports while calmly sipping coffee, the familiar taste steadying my nerves as I waited for the inevitable explosion. Liz! Parker burst through my door, his designer suit rumpled, face flushed crimson. Where the hell are the prime breeding stock? Where's Monarch? The Japanese investors will be here in 3 hours. I looked up from my genetic sequencing results, meeting his panicked gaze with practiced calm. Oh, they're perfectly safe. Hawthorne Genetics LLC transferred them to our contingency facility last night. The GPS monitoring confirms they arrived without stress markers. Hawthorne what? What are you talking about? His voice cracked as beads of sweat formed on his forehead. I pulled out a secure digital tablet and slid it across my desk, the International Livestock Genetics Registry logo glowing on the screen. 7 years ago, Grandpa Harold created a separate genetics entity to protect our bloodlines. Every valuable animal on this. Farm their DNA profiles, embryo rights, international breeding. Contracts, they're all registered under my company in the international database. The farm only maintained a license to use them, as long as specific genetic preservation protocols were followed. Parker grabbed the tablet, his hands trembling visibly as he frantically scrolled through the digital certificates. This is impossible. The farm owns these animals. I had our lawyers check everything. The farm owns some basic commercial stock, I corrected him, keeping my voice level despite the satisfaction warming my chest. But Monarch, his entire genetic line, the cryogenically preserved embryos in our lab, the multi-million-dollar international breeding contracts, they all belong to Hawthorne Genetics LLC. Check the blockchain verification on the registry entries. The color drained from his face as he frantically swiped through digital document after document, his finance-trained mind finally comprehending the magnitude of what was happening. Every major asset he had planned to leverage for quick profits was legally registered under my separate company. "Dad," he shouted, fumbling for his phone with shaking hands. "We have a serious problem." Dad arrived 20 minutes later with Vivian in tow, her perfectly applied makeup doing nothing to hide her fury. I'd already prepared a comprehensive presentation. International breeding registries, genetic patent certificates, blockchain-verified contract agreements, everything. Grandpa Harold and I had methodically established to protect our scientific legacy. The farm only maintained a licensing agreement for the genetic lines, I explained to Dad gently, seeing the confusion and betrayal in his tired eyes. It legally expired the moment you transferred control to someone, planning to abandon our established scientific protocols. "You underhanded little," Vivian began, her manicured finger, pointing accusingly at me, but Parker cut her off, his business mind, finally grasping the full implications of the situation. "How much?" he demanded, his voice tight with barely controlled rage. "How much to buy out Hawthorne Genetics?" I smiled, my hand unconsciously touching my grandfather's pocket watch. "It's not for sale at any price, but I have a counter-proposal that might interest you." I presented my terms clearly and confidently. I would license the genetics and breeding rights back to the farm, but only under specific conditions. I would maintain full scientific control over the breeding program and genetic development. No mass production, no dilution of genetic lines, no compromising the standards that had made Hawthorne cattle the gold standard in international breeding. The tension in the room was thick enough to cut with a knife. "And if we refuse your generous offer?" Parker asked through gritted teeth. His earlier confidence completely evaporated. "Then I relocate my company. My genetic lines and my international contracts elsewhere. Those Asian investors you scheduled for today? They're not paying premium prices for this property or your business plan. They're paying for access to our genetic lines and scientific expertise. Without them, Hawthorne Farms becomes just another commodity operation, worth perhaps a tenth of its current valuation." The words tasted both bitter and sweet on my tongue. Dad slumped heavily in his chair, suddenly looking every one of his 62 years. "Lizzie, why didn't you tell me about this arrangement with your grandfather?" My heart ached at the hurt in his eyes, but I held firm. "Would you have really listened, Dad? You were so captivated by Parker's modern business strategies and digital presentations. You forgot the scientific foundation that made our operations special in the first place. You stopped coming to the research facility, stopped asking about our breeding advancements. When was the last time you actually spent time with Monarch? Or reviewed our genetic databases?" The next few months were fraught with tension. Parker attempted to fight the arrangement legally, but our documentation and international registrations were ironclad. In the end, they had no choice but to accept my terms. Monarch and our prize breeding stock returned to their specialized pastures. I assumed complete control of the breeding program and genetic research, while Parker reluctantly focused on modernizing the IE farm's basic operations under my scientific oversight. Last month, at the International Cattle Genetics Symposium, our breeding program won 5 Excellence Awards for genetic innovation. Parker stood awkwardly at the celebration dinner, as scientists and international buyers praised our commitment to combining traditional breeding excellence with cutting-edge genetic science. His expression was a complex mixture of resentment and reluctant respect. "You planned this failsafe all along, didn't you?" he asked later, watching me collect genetic samples from a promising newborn calf, showing Monarch's distinctive markers, all those years of playing the modest farm veterinarian, while secretly being a genetic chess master. "I wasn't playing anything," I replied, carefully labeling the samples while monitoring the calf's vitals on my tablet. "I was protecting a scientific legacy that's taken generations to build. These animals aren't just assets on a spreadsheet or data points in your algorithms, Parker. They're living repositories of genetic excellence, and they're our responsibility to the future of sustainable agriculture. Yesterday, Dad visited my research facility, looking with new appreciation at my wall of advanced degrees, published research papers, and international breeding awards. Your grandfather would be proud of how you've protected everything, he said softly, his hand resting on my shoulder. Harold always said you were the one who truly understood what we were building here. I should have listened more carefully. The farm continues to thrive, though differently than Parker had envisioned. He's learning gradually and sometimes grudgingly that some values can't be reduced to profit algorithms. Sometimes he even helps with the genetic sampling, though he still complains about getting his designer shoes dirty. Last week, a young agricultural genetics student asked why I didn't just take my animals and scientific program elsewhere after such a betrayal. I showed her Monarch's newest offspring, already displaying the rare disease-resistant markers we'd spent 15 years developing. Because this land isn't just soil and grass, I told her, feeling the comforting weight of my grandfather's watch in my pocket. It's generations of scientific advancement, dreams, hard work, and dedication. Sometimes protecting a legacy means standing your ground with well-prepared legal documentation, even if you have to outsmart a Wharton MBA to do it. Hawthorne Farms remains a family operation, just with a much clearer understanding of who really guides its scientific destiny. And if you look carefully at the new sign by our front gate, you'll notice something significant. Hawthorne Farms, in proud scientific partnership with Hawthorne Genetics LLC. Sometimes the best revenge isn't about winning the argument. It's about preserving what truly matters, even if you have to use your opponent's own business tactics against them.